So for those of you joining online or those of you here, if you heard Project X and you're like, what's that? So we're changing our name tonight. If you haven't heard that, and we've used the word Project X to kind of get us familiar with this idea that we're not going to be called the Go Fund anymore in a short while. But I just want to pause first and say thank you to each of you. This is pretty overwhelming for me, and in a lot of ways an emotional night, as I think back to 9 years ago when it was literally just me in my bedroom, our second bedroom slash my office, and just trying to figure out how to do something in missions that mattered. And man, I could have stayed there alone in my second bedroom, first office, and just kept working alone, but wouldn't have accomplished very much. So it's because of you, donors, friends, family, missionary partners, that we've been able to accomplish quite a bit for the sake of the kingdom, all for God's glory. It's not for our praise, for my praise, for our team. It's all for the Lord. So thank you for playing a part and doing something with your life that really counts, in partnership with us. We're super grateful. So I'm so excited to have my good friend Claude Hickman with me. If you haven't met Claude, I'd love to introduce him to you, and I'll let him introduce himself in a minute. But a couple of reasons Claude is here tonight. Number one, Claude really cares about missions. When I was basically just a kid, I encountered Claude and actually his brother-in-law. These guys married twins, right? So they're married twins, and both of them like really care about missions.
Both angles you got.
What's that?
You got missions from like both sides.
Missions from both sides, right? And both their wives love missions. So I encounter these families, and they taught me basically everything I know about missions. And so that's one of the reasons why he's here. But secondly, he's not just a missions guy. He also started what I believe is one of the most strategic organizations in missions today, called the Traveling Team. And additionally, the last thing, Claude knows a ton about our humble beginnings because he was there. And he actually played a really key role to make sure we didn't fail like within the first few months. And so we're going to talk a little bit about that tonight. But before we do that, can I just have you introduce yourself and tell us about the Traveling Team?
Um, well, I'm the executive director for the traveling team, and yeah, I remember we met when you were still a student. Um, and I'll talk a little bit about kind of how our paths crossed, but I just want to say this first of all. I know you want tonight to be about donors and other people, but I just want to say how proud we are of you. I think I'd just echo everybody on this call and in the room. We were talking about missions history earlier, and I really believe that there's some things that God doesn't do in history until there's a person who's willing to risk everything to see it done. And I think you're one of those people. And I just want you to know, man, we believe in you. I know tonight's really special for you. I have no idea what you're going to say, but I'm here.
Me
Uh,
neither.
but I believe, and I think we would say, man, we believe God has his anointing, his hand on your life for a special work in the world through what you're doing right now. So I'm honored to be here. When we were traveling, I remember the very first like semester that we were on the road with Todd and Jessica, and we were traveling, and I had never thought about student loan debt. Like I didn't get a single scholarship. My parents had to save, and my wife's smarter than me, but her parents kind of had saved. But we were starting to go to places like Duke, where it was like $50,000 a year. I was like, that's insane. And then we went to Asbury College, where the revival, like was. And one of our teammates had met with a married couple, and they said, they sat down and was like, we're missions majors. We want to be missionaries, but we have $80,000 in debt. And my friends, started saying, well, we can figure out how to get that down to where mission agency maybe let you go and split it in half, 40. And they're like, no, we have 80 each, have 80. And that was the first time I realized, like, this is a huge problem. And at the time, this is early 2000s, mission agencies really had kind of a cap on what they would let people raise. So, here we are trying on the traveling team end to mobilize hundreds of thousands of people to go, but we had this ceiling of student loan debt. And I feel like, man, when we started talking about the Rimsteads and you started seeing some of the same things, uh, it was just God's plan. It was God's plan to burden you with that, to not just release your friends, but to release now many, many workers, from that hurdle.
Thanks. Yeah, you weren't supposed to make me cry before I talk, Claude. That's not fair, man. Thanks for saying that. That was sweet. So yeah, one of my early memories of the first year of the Go Fund was like I literally had no idea how to raise money. And this is a nonprofit, so you got to learn how to do that. And so I bought this book for $10 called How to Host a Fundraising Dinner. It's literally called Fundraising Dinner Operations Manual. It's like the most boring title ever. And that's exactly what it was. It was an operations manual on how to host a fundraising dinner. So we're putting on this dinner. It cost me $10, probably all the money we had. And we're planning for this thing. We're like, oh no, I got to get a speaker. I'm like, well, I can't speak. Like, who do I know who can talk about missions? I'm like, oh, I know this guy, Claude. Claude's really good at speaking about missions because he's going on the road. He's going to hundreds of college campuses every year to talk about missions. So he's got the talk down. And so I go to Claude at some point and ask him to be the speaker for this very first fundraising event. It was crazy. We got like 200 people to show up, and we build this whole thing. We get a few missionaries on stage, aspiring missionaries who have this student debt. And then Claude shows up. Claude gets on stage, and like we didn't know how we're going to do. I think it cost us $12,000. Like, man, if we could get like $15,000, we'd have like $3,000 that we could spend on student debt for a missionary, or like maybe it's more. Like we didn't even know. And so I like for you to take us back, and I'll tell you how much we raised in a minute. But I'd like you to take us back to, I think it was May 15, 2015, and talk to us about you getting
I
on
can't remember what
stage.
day of the week it is.
Man, I looked at that date so many times on a spreadsheet, man. I looked at it every single
I
day.
remember it was fancy. We were in Orange County, and I remember I was like, wow, dude, he went big. How are you going to pay? You got to raise the money to pay for this thing. I didn't feel like I belonged. Somebody made fun of my shoes. The only dress shoes I had, I dust them off.
So I'm like,
and
Claude, you got to dress up. You have to. He's like, what does that mean?
like I bought a suit. Yeah, we were winging it, but I remember prepping for that, and obviously, we care about not just goers but senders. For the traveling team, that's always been a value. I have missions friends that act like goers are the obedient ones, and senders, there'll always be senders, people who don't obey the call to go or whatever. And I think that's stupid. And I don't see my donors like that. I know you don't see donors like that. I know my donors don't see themselves like that. I don't think Jesus saw Mary, Joanna, like people who supported him out of their personal means like that. They're valuable. And so I believe that, but I was thinking, man, what do I say? And I remember I came to Romans 10. Everyone who calls upon the name of the Lord will be saved. How can they hear unless someone preaches him? But how can they preach unless they're sent? I was like, oh my gosh, it's been right in front of me. There it is. Like it's been right there in front of me this whole time. We need both people who go to preach, but how can they preach unless they're sent? And I think I stole this phrase from somebody else, but that's when we came up with the every arrow needs a bow. And I think that was the line that you guys liked, that became kind of the image for that first dinner.
Yeah, I remember like every single table had like a little bow and arrow on it. And like to this day, 8 years later, people still talk about that. There are people who got connected with our ministry and just with missions in general, like literally for the first time in their lives. There were people at that dinner who had gone to church their whole lives and like couldn't give you a one sentence summary on what missions was. Like missions is just being nice to people, and they show up and they hear this, like they get like missiology 101 from Claude. And I think it really helped mobilize the first group of people that supported what we did. And like without you there, it's like I don't think we'd be here right now. But a lot of people caught that vision and they're like, oh, I thought missions was just for missionaries. Like I thought missions was just for people going. Like I think a lot of people thought then what I thought, which is missions is for others, right? Maybe some of you felt that growing up in the church. You're like, oh, missions is good. I'm not opposed to missions, but it's for other people, right? But I think a lot of people heard that and they're like, oh, missions isn't actually for others. It's for me. It's for every believer in every age and every stage. And your metaphor, of becoming a bow for those arrows gave people a vision for that. So tell us about, man, since then, like the last 10 years of your ministry, like how have you seen this bow and arrow metaphor, come to pass in your ministry and the traveling team? Is you're talking to what, like a couple hundred like campuses every year or something like that? What does that look like at the traveling team to mobilize people to not just be goers but senders?
Well, I think that's been, part of the problem in mobilizing the American church, for a long time has been we've always thought the only way for me to be involved is to get a plane ticket and go somewhere. We got the goers and the wavers. That's what my friend says. Like some people go and the rest of us just wave goodbye, and have no part to play. And but I think there's a lot of faithful, obedient, godly men and women out there that want to be involved. They want to help be a part of reaching the world, spreading God's kingdom. But also God's called them into workplace, ministry, like places where they're very valuable. How many of you guys want more Christians in our elementary schools right now? Like we need more Christians in our culture right now. They don't all need to be cross-cultural missionaries, but I think what you've done is given people a way to not only be a light where they're at, but to have their hand in the ministry that Jesus is doing all over the world. And just like, we were reading earlier, this, you've given people an opportunity to be a part of a purpose that's way bigger than what they come into work for on Monday morning. And I think once people begin to connect, that and to that kind of purpose, you're not only serving the missionaries that are getting sent out, you're serving the families that get to say, man, God, we get to be a part of holding the ropes, and send them. So I think that's the message that we want for every student we talk to, is that you're either going to be a goer or a sender. And I think it's the biggest need in the church right now, is to figure out how do we not just mobilize more missionaries, but how do we mobilize every Christian to say, man, I'm either going to be an arrow,
Yeah.
right, to take the gospel somewhere, and we need more arrows,
Yeah.
but man, we need a strong bow. Like we need a
Yeah.
strong sending church to pray, give, and support them and send them.
So what do you call someone who's a Christian but is not an arrow and is not a bow? Because there's got to be some of those too. Do we have a name for that?
I thought of a lot of things I can't say on the podcast.
All right, well, we'll
I
leave
don't
that.
know.
So one other memory I have of Claude is early on. I really mean I had no idea what I was doing, and Claude connected me with this guy. And do you remember when you connected me with Chris? Chris Lucy actually might be on the call. So he currently lives in Texas, and he became a founding board member. But do you remember that?
I barely knew Chris. I
Yeah.
just liked him. He was sharp. Well, what happened was, as we were traveling, we found out about another ministry called MedSend, which was it was kind of similar. It was for any students that were studying to become medical professionals or doctors. There was a group of Christian doctors who said, "We'll come along. We'll help take over their student loan debt so that they can go." And it really, when you think about it, it's not. Sometimes it's not that much money, but you'd be surprised at what small encouragement like that will help someone really flip the switch from I can't do this to I can. And so we had heard about it, and we every once in a while we'd meet a random student who was a doctor who we would tell about that. But I always had it kind of tucked back here in the back of my head. And I think when we started talking about this, that was the first thing I said is we need to find those people. And I think I just met someone from that organization, like at something before, but connecting you with them, with Chris,
And that
US
was
Center
big.
people.
Connecting with medicine was big, by the way. So this is like how bad my first idea was. I'm like, all right, we'll just raise, if someone's 50 grand in student debt, we'll raise up the money and we'll pay all of it off, and then we'll send them. And I
What'd
talked
they
to
say?
medicine. They're like, no, 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 don't do that. Don't do that. Whatever you don't do that, because then people are just going to sign up, get the money, and then they're out. I'm like, oh yeah, that's a really good idea. So they're the ones who told me like, hey, you should be paying this monthly, right? Pay it on a monthly basis across like 10 years. So that way, if they come home early, you've only paid like 5 or 10% of the student debt, and you can use the rest of the money for someone who's going to the field. So thank you for connecting me with them, because we would have lost a lot of money. Yeah. Yeah.
I did a great job of pointing you to other people. That's basically what I hear. And I was the only mission speaker,
You're the only mission speaker ever. Okay. And then after that, you connected me with Chris.
Yeah.
So Chris at the time was working at the US Center for World Mission in Pasadena. So he was there for about 5 years, and has since moved to Texas to start a college, basically a globally minded college when it comes to academics and launching young people to be bows or arrows, really. And I remember driving up to Pasadena. Allison and I, we got married. We eventually moved there a few months later. And I was in Chris's office for like basically 6 hours every Saturday for like 3 months. And he literally just listened to me talk for that long, which sounds super painful, right? And it was great. Like I was able to work out some of these early stage ideas and get feedback from him. And man, if you learn anything from Claude's story, what I hope you take away is that there's probably going to be some person in your life at some point who has a super weird idea and probably sounds like a bad idea even. And the best thing you can say to that young person is do it. Like do it. Do that thing and I'll speak at your event and I'll connect you to someone else and I'll point you in the direction of people who can help. Because without a few of those people early on in my life, I for sure would have given up. Right? Everyone has a breaking point at some point where they say, "This, this is really a dumb idea." But all you need is a few people to come along and say, "No, no, no, no. There's something here. There's something here." Right? Even if it, all the details aren't worked out, there's something here, and you can do this, and God can help you do it, and I'm going to help you. So thank you for being one of those guys for me early on. Hey, I'm very excited about tonight. And I think Claude being here is special because we're connecting the very beginning to kind of a new beginning for us. And by the way, I also want to point out Maria Price standing right there. Sorry to embarrass you. So Maria actually coordinated that very first vision dinner in 2015. And I remember this is just another example of me of no idea what I was doing. There's 200 people who show up to the event, right? And we pay $12,000 for the event. If you do the math, it was really cheap. Everyone had steak. I don't even know how that happened, right? We figured it out. And there's 200 people in the foyer. The doors hadn't opened yet. There's 20 tables, 20 round tables. And I'm like sitting there at one of the tables by myself, like waiting for everyone to come in. And Maria comes up to me. She's like, "What are you doing?" I'm like, "What do you mean?" "I'm waiting for people to come in." She's like, "Get out there. Go talk with people." I'm like, "Oh, I'm supposed to do that?" Like, I didn't even know. I was supposed to do it. But Maria was also one of those like early coaches for me, helped us coordinate this event. I'm super grateful for your investment in my life as well. So tonight is a big night. Tonight, we're going to talk about a new vision for the organization. And when I say new, what I don't mean is we're going a different direction. It's actually just a sharpening of the same vision that we developed in Chris Lucy's office 9 years ago. And I think we have better words now to say what we've done all along than we did back then. There are two principles that have really shaped my thinking, my leadership as I've grown over the last 9 years. I've grown with the team, with friends of the ministry. And I just want to review these two real quick and invite you into not just the last 9 years, but the future years and the spirit of these principles. Yeah, the first one, and I think back to that first vision dinner. There was someone who attended that dinner who may be on the call now. I don't know. But this person didn't know much about missions, right? Which by the way, was me like 3 years before that. So I was in the exact same condition, like literally months before that. And they showed up, growing up in the church, not having known about missions. And, we put the missionaries on stage. Claude does his talk. Everyone's crying, right? And this guy pulls out the little pledge card, right? Where you write, how much you're going to give, right? People know it's a fundraising dinner, come with a pen in their jacket, right? They're ready to go. And he fills out this card and he checks the box for how much he's going to give monthly. And then there's another set of boxes that ask how long you're going to give. It's like, you want to do that for a year, for 2 years, for 3 years. And he created a brand new box and he wrote next to the box the words, "Keep going." And I remember, because I think Maria, you and I, and Matt, you might have been there. We were just opening these up and saw that box and started crying because we realized like, man, not only are we going to be okay, but this isn't us doing this alone. And the principle that I walked away with that night, and this is one that's stuck with us for the last 9 years, is people give to people compelled by a vision. And that night, that guy who gave, who's still a close friend and connected with the ministry very closely, he knew someone at the organization, right? And he knew someone who was involved in this. There was a relationship, but also we cast a big vision, the biggest vision we could possibly muster that night, mostly aided by Claude, right? So he's sharing this big vision and he got on board. And so in the spirit of what we did back then, we want to continue to cast vision, right? There's a verse in Proverbs 29:18 that says, "Where there's no vision, the people perish, but he that keepeth the law, happy is he." Like, people need vision. Vision leaks, right? We forget. I forget. We need a reminder of a vision, where we're headed. Vision answers the question, where are we going? So tonight we hope to answer that question for you in a fresh, new way that still maintains the core of where we've been. People need a vision. People give to people compelled by a vision. Now, I think about another story, fast forwarding a few years. We had started funding our employees, myself first and Matt next, and a couple people after that, by raising support. Like, how's this for a lousy deal? We're like, hey, you should totally come on our team. You're a perfect fit. We have everything you need except your salary. You just got to go raise that. And they're like, what do you mean no salary? Like, no, you got to go raise the money and then we're set, right? Like, that was the deal. So we did that. It was amazing. People, they bought into that. And they raised their salary. Like, Matt raised his salary. His dad's standing right next to him. Harry's probably like, well, that's a really bad idea. Matt's like, I know it's a bad idea, but I got to do this, right? So the people were very kind to believe enough in the vision to be willing to go out and raise their own salary. Because, I mean, we couldn't pay them. We didn't have enough money for that. A couple of years ago, though, we got to a point where we decided we were going to roll off of personal support. And personal support was awesome. Like, we didn't look at it as a bad thing. We weren't disappointed with it. It was great. And it got us here. But there's another principle that we've come to learn, even with, good vision and, legacy of where we've been. The second principle for us is this: the things that got you here won't get you there. The things that got you here won't get you there. And personal support was one of those things. It got us to that point and we were grateful for it. But we realized if we want to grow this team, well, not everyone's going to be willing to raise support. And maybe someone's later stage in their career, and to make that transition is going to be tough. And there's onboarding takes a long time, There's so many reasons we wanted to transition. So we did, and it worked, and we're so grateful. And I think tonight represents another one of those moments. We're not looking at our last name and our last vision statement and saying, well, that wasn't good. No, it was good. It was good for a season. In fact, Ecclesiastes 3:1 says this: for everything there is a season, a time for every activity under heaven. The things that got us here won't get us there. And we think this is the proper time to pivot and start to look toward this new vision and new name for the organization. People give to people compelled by a vision, and the things that got you here won't get you there. As we're walking down memory lane, just briefly, I want to give you a summary of the last 9 years. And as I'm looking at faces in this room, and for those of you online, you've all been a part of this in some way. So I just want to summarize 9 years by the numbers. Can I do that? Share a couple numbers with you. So in the last 9 years, by God's grace, we've been able to hire 10 employees. Our 10th employee started yesterday. Luke Maynard, number 10. Next time we add a digit, it'll be 100 employees. I don't think we'll probably ever get there, but glad you're here, Luke. We also have supported so far 117 missionaries. Yeah. And when I say we, I mean we. I hope you hear that. We have helped those 117 missionaries get into 31 countries. One of those countries has 9 missionaries. That's the country that has the most number of missionary partners that we've helped. We've partnered with 29 mission agencies, some of them more than others. We've raised $7.3 million in total revenue. And we partnered with 2,029 donors. These numbers represent not just dollars and cents or numbers on a spreadsheet. They represent a story. And each of you has been an important part of that story in different ways, and we're grateful. And we look back on the 9 years with so much fondness, and we wouldn't be here without you. So from the bottom of my heart, thank you for being a part of this story that we're putting together as we play a small part in God's bigger, global, more eternal story that we get to be a part of, which is incredible. Over the last few years, we realized there's 3 problems that we were running into again and again and again when it came to our name, our vision, our brand. And so I want to share this with you. The first one that we had was just brand confusion, right? We had a problem with brand confusion. I've heard it said before that the confused mind says no. In other words, if you're confused about an organization or what they're doing, you just say no. You're like, maybe that's not for me. And so we think we were causing some brand confusion, primarily in that we started as I would call it a mono programmatic organization. We had one program. We had one thing we did, And we did that for like 8.5 years, and it worked really well. We grew by 32% per year in terms of total revenue, and even more than that in terms of the missionaries we could help. But we're doing one thing. And so our name and our program were really the same. So the Go Fund is the org that pays student debt for missionaries, right? And that's kind of what we became known as, which we're fine with. But at some point earlier this year, when we launched the second program, the missions course, right, to help American churchgoers learn about God's heart for the nations, we realized, well, that doesn't really make sense. Like the missions course by the Go Fund. Well, that doesn't really fit. It doesn't sound the same. And for those who are close with us, it especially didn't fit. You're like, wait, so do you pay student debt with that new program? We're like, no, not really. So we just ran into some problems with brand confusion. So we wanted to get away from that. Number two, this predates that problem, but we had this issue with the missing audience, right? So our name is, up until this point, the Go Fund. But Cloud was just talking about, like, what about the senders? She's like, should we call it like the Go Send Fund? And it just didn't have the same snappiness. We're like, yeah, that probably doesn't work. But even in our name, we weren't really highlighting the majority of the people, of these 2,029 people who were helping us. Those are the senders. There's 2,029 senders. There's 117 goers, but we're called the Go Fund. That didn't really work either. And then problem number three, I think, is probably the biggest problem. Our vision was just too small. It's just too small for what we believe God had called us to do. And part of that happens, like, Jeff Bezos didn't start Amazon with this, big ambition to take over the world. He was selling books, right? He's selling books online. And at some point he's like, oh, this is working, right? And he keeps expanding the vision. And we found something similar. Like our vision was too small. We found ourselves getting kind of pigeonholed as a student debt people. And yeah, we don't have a problem with student debt. We actually hate student debt. We love paying it off. That's what we like. But it's not just so we can pay student debt. It's because we want the gospel to get to the unreached. We didn't want to be known as the student debt people. We wanted to be known as the Great Commission people. Like, that's what we really care about. And so we had those three problems, like brand confusion, this kind of missing audience of senders, and our vision was just too small. And so we really had three alternatives, three things we could really do with those issues. We could just leave things as they were, which is confusing. So we're like, yeah, we don't want to do that. Number two, we could have split into two organizations. We could have been, hey, the Go Fund's over here, the missions course is over here. Maybe another day we start another organization. We're like, no, that's too complex and it's actually unnecessary. We like having the shared services of one person who can manage our office and one person who can, do other stuff for both programs. So we had this third option, and the third option really made the most sense for us. And that was to create a new, clarified, single umbrella entity that both programs would sit under. It's a brand new name for the organization without losing our core. And in order to do that, we'd have to come up with a new name, a vision statement that was big enough to fit these two programs and maybe even future programs inside of it without losing our core. We don't want to drift from our mission as an organization. And so that's what we decided to do. And so that's what we're going to be announcing tonight. In fact, right now. As we're introducing what I'll call Project X, just for another minute or two, the real problem we were looking at was not just student debt. It's not just the missionless churchgoer, right? Those are the problems that our programs are solving. But if we zoom out, like, what is really the big problem that we're thinking about? And this is the big problem. Missions is messy. That's the problem. Missions is messy. It's awkward. It's complicated. There's only one mission speaker because no one wants to talk about it, right? Like, it's messy. Most of the easy problems in missions have already been solved. That's why the ones that remain are messy. And we often don't want to step into them because messes aren't easy to step into. But these problems, these messy problems, aren't worth solving because they're easy. They're worth solving because they're worthy. And God told us to do this. And so we want to step into it. And so many Christians are entertained by the story, but they're not in it. They're entertained by the story, but they're not in the story. So what we want to do is we want to invite Christians into the center of these messy, awkward missions problems to help, by God's grace, give them the fullness of life that they've been looking for. Because a lot of people are bored. A lot of Christians are bored. And I believe that the fullness of life that Jesus talks about in John 10:10 came to give them life and give it to them in the full is found right at the center of these messy missions problems. We want to convert Christians to missions. That's what we're doing. That's the problem that we're solving is we invite Christians into the center of this messy missions landscape. We want to help convert Christians to missions. So we have to talk about not just the problem, but where we're headed, right? A vision statement answers the question, where are we headed, right? It's a destination, right? The answer to that question is the vision statement. So I would like to introduce to you a brand new vision statement for this organization to be named in just a moment so you can have an idea of where we're headed. This might take a dramatic long time. We don't know yet. We've never done this. Send it. That took a lot longer than we thought it would. To end missions. That's our vision. You might see that and think, well, that's kind of weird. That's like running a sales organization. Your vision's like to end sales. Like, why would you do that? Well, it's because we're not in sales, right? We're about the King's work. And I want to clarify what to end missions means because that may sound confusing. There's an asterisk on the end of that to make sure that we stay focused. And here it is. One day, God will end missions. Until then, there's work to do. And that's where you come in, and that's where we come in. These bored Christians, and I've been one before. I was there not long ago. We get to step into these messy missions problems. We get to do that. We get to do some of the King's work. And to end missions, like why would we say it that way? Did you know that missions is temporary? Missions is a temporary necessity. You know, one thing that won't be in heaven? Missions. There's a lot of things that won't be in heaven, but one of them is missions. There's no missions in heaven, right? It's not going to exist because you won't need it, right? And we look forward to that day when missions isn't needed, not because we don't like it, but because it's actually a means. It's not the end, right? The end is actually worship. Missions is the means so that people will worship Jesus in heaven for all of eternity. And we get to play a part in that, right? To be the means that gets to that end, the eternal worship in heaven toward Jesus, the King of Kings and the Lord of Lords. And the way to get to that end is actually not to stop doing missions. It's to keep doing missions and to keep doing it relentlessly and lifting off barriers in the way of it until one day it's no longer needed. By the way, only God will determine when missions is no longer needed. And when that happens, we will have done what we set out to do. That's why here at this organization, our vision is to end missions. We have to remember, one day God will end missions. And until then, there's work for us to do. For 9 years, we've been known as the Go Fund. And we're so grateful for this 9 years. We're grateful for the name that God gave us. And we believe that God has given us a new name for this new season with this new sharpened vision for our organization as we get a bigger, bolder, clearer sense of where we're headed. So starting today, in this moment, we will no longer be known as the Go Fund. Starting today, in this moment, we will now be known as AIRO. AIRO is actually a Greek word meaning to take up or to remove. The existing mission of our organization, which by the way hasn't changed, our mission statement is staying the same. So vision is where you're headed, right? It's a destination. Mission is how you get there. So how we do what we do isn't changing. It's to eliminate barriers to advance the gospel to the unreached. AIRO means to remove. Like, come on, that's exactly what we're doing. You could say that we're as focused in another way as an arrow to its target in getting the unreached the gospel of Jesus. So this is kind of insider family talk here, but we think it's a really fun and subtle nod to the talk that you gave 9 years ago, where you inspired a group of people that turned into 2,000 plus people to be the bows that fired the arrows. So thank you for helping us get to where we are today, man.
I just want to switch.
Do we have merch? So from this point forward, this organization will be known as AIRO. Here's what this does not mean. This does not mean that we're drifting from our mission. I just shared with you a minute ago, our mission isn't changing, right? It's to eliminate barriers to advance the gospel to the unreached. So what are we doing? Like, where are we headed? Here. We're headed to the end of missions, to end missions, right? One day God will end missions. Until then, there's work to do. How do we do that? By eliminating barriers to advance the gospel to the unreached. That's what we do. And right now we're working on 2 of them, right? Working on 2 barriers. Working on number 1, the aspiring indebted missionary. That's one problem we're working on, one barrier. And number 2, the missionless churchgoer, the person who's been going to church all their life, just like I was, and they had no idea that God had called them to make his purpose the priority and passion of their life, right? God's purpose is for his glory to be praised through Jesus among the nations. And for us, for Christ's followers, he's calling us to make that the priority and the passion for our life. And we're helping people with that through the missions course. So it doesn't mean we're drifting from our mission. That's not changing. It also doesn't mean we're neglecting or changing or abandoning our flagship program, right? We have 117 missionary partners. One of them's in the room. We're going to keep paying your student debt until it's gone, right? As you do work globally and bring people the gospel who've never heard it before, right? We actually have ambition to grow that program, right? We have 117 today, and we want to see it more than double by the end of 2025. Our goal is 250 missionaries supported by the end of 2025. So here's what this does mean. This does mean that we're more sure than ever about where we're going, right? We want to talk more about our vision than we talk about our mission. And in the past, and this is on me, we've talked more about the mission because we're excited about it. But we want to be a vision-driven organization, not just a mission-driven organization. So it does mean we're more sure about where we're headed. It also means we have the infrastructure to build out more programs beneath the new brand, right? To be clear, we don't have any plans to like add a new program anytime soon. Like some eyes got big in the room of team members. Like, we don't have a 3rd program we're unveiling tonight. Someday, by God's grace, if we have more capacity, we may do that, but for now we're just going to focus on the 2 that we have.
Merch program. We need some merch.
Claude wants a merch program. New merch. He wants a sweatshirt. Yeah. Or can we get Claude a sweatshirt? Yeah. And then number 3, what this does mean is that we have clarity for our friends, donors, missionaries, people who go through the missions course, about where we're headed and about the shared cause. So thank you to each of you for being a part of the last 9 years in many different ways. And we look forward to the next 9 years and beyond about where God will take this organization, because it's not my organization. It's not our staff's. It's not yours. It's his. And so to the end of stewarding what he has given us collectively, we look forward to seeing where he takes us. So thank you for being a part of that.
Come on. Man, I was dialed in. Like, I could have sat here for another like 45 minutes of that. I don't know about you guys. I know we have like bedtimes and stuff, but I was locked in. That's awesome. We're going to move into a time of Q&A. So for those of you online, if you've been thinking of questions, you can drop your questions in the chat and we'll try to get some of those loaded up. For those of you in the room, feel free to like shoot your hand up and we'll try to get to as many of the questions as we can in the next 10 or so minutes. In the meantime, we have a couple of questions that some of you sent in before we got started with this meeting over the last couple of weeks. So Luke, I'll just start with a couple of those for you and see where we go from there.
And by the way, if you have a question for Claude, you can ask Claude too. Yeah. It's the best mission speaker I know. So.
Awesome. So a lot of people are asking, you mentioned some of the numbers of the student debt repayment program, of where the GoFund has been. A lot of people are curious to hear an update on the missions course. How is the missions course doing? Because I think our last SOTO call, we were on the verge of launching the missions course.
We had 0 of everything on our last call.
There's nothing. And now it has since launched.
Yeah.
You share an update with everybody on how that's going?
Yeah. So the missions course launched on March 1st. The missions course, more or less, is a 6-week course that's primarily video based, that invites people to explore God's heart for the nations and discover what role they can play, even if they never change their geography. Right. So we say that, missions is for every believer in every age and every stage. It's not just for missionaries. It's for you if you're a follower of Christ. So we just expose them to that. So if you're interested, you haven't checked it out, go to themissionscourse.com. And you can also go through it individually if you want to do that, or introduce us to your missions pastor or to your senior pastor. Maybe their church can go through it. But in terms of where we're at, we've had 198 individuals go through the course. We've had 11 churches register to take either their entire church through it or a portion of their church through it, and have 59 more churches in the pipeline who are engaged with, who are talking about rolling it out at their church. So yeah, we want to keep getting this in front of churchgoers and help them escape where I was, like the bored Christian who thought life was about, I honestly thought if I tied to my church, that God would make me rich. Like that was the lie that I believed deep down. And that's so boring. Like that was it. And I knew that was boring. And some guys came along in my life and gave me a vision of something bigger. So we just want to do that for them. So.
That's awesome. This might be a big question, but we're looking at big things and going to big places. So what are some other needs that we see as organization, or that you see personally in Missions Cloud? Maybe you can speak to that too.
Yeah.
What are some of the big needs that you guys see in missions?
Yeah. So we've done a lot of thinking about this, and Matt Sonke did a research project that took him like a year, literally. He was going fast. He was just talking to hundreds of people and digging deep to figure out, like, what are the actual barriers in missions? Can we catalog them? And we discovered 5 buckets, if you will, of issues. And it seems like most issues in missions, most barriers in missions fit into one of these buckets. So one of them is discipleship issues. That's where a lot of them sit. So just sin, people who are in sin. And so not engaging in missions by going or sending because of the sin, addicted to pornography, maybe having, poor theology, people saying I'm not called. Maybe you could talk about I'm not called in a minute. Having, apathy toward missions, ignorance, just not knowing that there's unreached people groups, spiritual immaturity. Those are all discipleship issues. There's also financial issues. So student debt is one of them. Maybe also the temptation of a promising career here, that sort of thing. Relationship issues, especially young people who are going overseas. A lot of them want to get married. And if you're single, that may prevent you from going overseas. We're empathetic to that. Sometimes parents won't let me go overseas. That can be a big burden. That's a relationship issue. There's also logistical issues, just like I don't know where to go. I have a visa issue, something like that. And then there's also issues of well-being. So you have a physical issue that prevents you from being able to go, a mental or emotional or psychological issue that prevents you from engaging in missions on the field or even here. So those are kind of the buckets. But man, could you just talk about I'm not called?
Well, missions is not a felt need, so all of the hurdles that you just talked about, one of the other reasons they're there is it's just, there's not a whole lot of motivation to go, man, I want to give my life away to other people in general. I like to assume the best about Christians, though. I think a lot of it is just ignorance. And so some things like the mission course are super helpful just to expose Christians to the world. I was just telling you in our little Bible study I was doing, I gave my guys an assignment to go look up how many lost people are there on planet Earth, how many unreached people groups are there. And through just reading this book and just going to look up those numbers, this guy's like, this is going to change the course of my future. And so I think there's something about getting American Christians just exposed to the needs in the world, God's heart for the world. And once you start looking at, there's one missionary in India for every like 1 million people versus one missionary in, Argentina for every 180 people. It gets really hard to say God hasn't called me when you're talking about that kind of imbalance, because the language of calling a lot of times starts to shift the blame for the 1040 window, unreached peoples. It shifts the blame away from me to who? To God.
Yes.
And so just learning about the world, sometimes those things like, what does it look like to be called, sort of disappear, and people start to admit, you know what? The Bible's pretty clear. God, Jesus commanded it. The world's unreached. I don't need to wait on some kind of special calling.
Wow.
So go missions course. We need more.
I was waiting for my name in the clouds at some point, Luke.
Jesus floats through your bedroom window. You're going to Africa, sucker.
No. That's good. Thanks. Yeah. Any others?
Yeah. If there's any in the room, feel free to let us know. Another one, a couple people actually have asked online, how can people help? I was about to say the GoFund. You know how much of a relief it is to not have to say the GoFund or Project X anymore? Like,
yeah.
I can say AIRO now,
Right.
like it's open.
And by the way, just a clarification, we're keeping the name the GoFund. The GoFund will actually be the name of the program that pays student debt for our missionary partners. So AIRO, it is really nice to say that.
Right?
It's been secret.
It feels so good.
So many people have asked me, and I've been like, I think they will shoot me if I tell you the name. I'm not allowed to. So AIRO is the name of like the entity, and then the programs beneath that are the GoFund and the missions course. And actually, I want to point out one other person. I already shouted her out, but Maria and Dex, there he is, Dex Alexander. So they run an awesome brand firm called, am I saying that right? Brand agency called Legible. And they actually were the ones that came up with this name. And they helped us develop a lot of the strategy, even some of these lines that I'm saying, like convert Christians to missions. That was them. Can we give them a round of applause for the way they've helped us? Yeah. So if your church or nonprofit or for-profit organization is looking to do anything connected to branding, a new name, a new website, clarity on your brand, you got to reach out to, is it legible.org? Legible.org, and get in touch with these people because they've been so helpful. Yeah.
So speaking about AIRO, which is great to say, how can people help AIRO, partner with AIRO, support AIRO going forward? You were just saying that the GoFund is still the program, the missions course is still the program, but how can people on a broad scale support AIRO and help AIRO and partner with AIRO going forward?
Yeah. So one of our biggest needs moving forward is exposure. Like we've never been great at generating exposure for ourselves. So I think we need just your connections. We need for you to share about us with other people. And one of the ways that we're planning to do that, we've already started. We have like literally a makeshift film studio over here that we're currently building. We're hoping to develop thought leadership in the mission space. So to actually start speaking about missions a lot. And by the way, we don't see ourselves as the expert. We don't want to be the sage on the stage. We want to be the guide on the side. And so we are inviting people into our office, our studio, into this space to start to talk about missions. I just did an interview with Claude 2 days ago. We're bringing others in along the same line. So as we start to produce that content and push it on YouTube and TikTok and LinkedIn and some other sites, share it with other people. Engage with us online. This is where people are talking about this stuff. Like it or not, this is where the world is. This is where Christians are. And again, a lot of them are bored, right? And we want to help convert them to missions, right? And invite them into that fullness of life that God has for them. And one of the ways you can do that is maybe sending your friend an article, which by the way, is going to be available on our brand new website, like as of tonight. So send them an article, send them a post so they can get engaged with what we're doing. And they don't need to give to us. They might do that, but they might not. Like our goal is not to grow like our slice of the missions pie. You got this missions pie. We're like, oh, we need like a bigger slice. No. Like we want to see the whole pie get bigger. right? We want to see more Christians getting involved, even if that means our slice gets smaller as a percentage of the whole. We don't care about our slice. We want more Christians to engage in this. So maybe there's a resource we produce that you like, you think of a friend, to share it with them.
That's awesome. Thanks, Luke.
Yeah.
If you guys have other questions, like Luke was just saying, feel free to engage with us online. Speaking of engaging with us online, as of tonight, you can follow us on our brand new social media, AIRO Missions. I think there's an underscore in the middle if I'm right. So it's AIRO_missions. You can follow that social media now. It's live. It's ready to go. And if you have any other questions,
Someone here could be the first follower.
yeah, hurry up and get in there.
Oh.
I think there might already be one,
Oh,
like
sorry.
testing everything.
Sorry.
But we'll remove that so you can be the first one. Yeah, feel free to engage with us there. We'd love to be able to engage with your questions about the organization, about our vision to end missions, about where we're going and how we're getting there. We'd love to connect with you that way. So feel free to hop on there and follow us and shoot your questions in that way. Our new website, like Luke was just saying, is also available and live right now, airomissions.com. You can hop on there and see some of the thought leadership content regarding missions. It's already up. It's already live. It's already ready for you guys.
As of like 5 minutes ago, it's live.
It just happened. Yeah. It's like brand new. So you could be the first one to visit the website too.
So if something breaks, please tell us.
That's on social media after you follow us. It's all connected. We're just trying to loop you guys in everywhere. Yeah, so those are the two brand new things we really want to encourage you guys towards as we're wrapping up this call. The other part of that is, as we're thinking forward, we have our next SOTO, our first official SOTO as AIRO, not as the GoFund or as Project X. Our first official SOTO as AIRO will be happening on July 20th. So it's a month and a half away, about July 20th, same time, 6 to 7 p.m. Pacific time. You can join us virtually. I don't think we're going to be doing this whole live thing again for that one necessarily. Sorry to bum out anybody in the room, but it takes a lot to get this happening, and we don't have anything brand new to drop off the wall yet. So feel free to put that on your calendar, get ready to join us for that. We'll be sending out more information about all that coming in the future. Luke, do you have anything else that you want to say? Just thanking everyone for being here. And
yeah, just want to thank you all for being here and the way that you supported us for so long. And again, we wouldn't be here without you, and we're excited for the future. So yeah, feel free to stick around and celebrate with us. And for those of you who joined online, thank you. I know, I think some of you are like on the East Coast, so it's like midnight or something, super late. So thanks for staying up and being with us. And again, this is not our ministry, it's God's. So appreciate you helping us steward it well.
God. Yeah. So for our virtual guests, typically you guys might be used to us hanging around afterward and just chatting and talking. I know Luke's kids usually like hop in the call and say hi to everybody, which is great. But tonight we're not going to be doing that just because we do have a live audience here with us. We're going to spend some time hanging out with them, and we're going to look forward to seeing you guys at our next SOTO and the next events that we have coming up in the future. So keep an eye out, keep an eye on our social media, on our website. We're looking forward to seeing all of you guys soon. But thank you again so much for joining us at SOTO. And to our live guests, thank you all for being here. This was exciting. This was awesome. We're really glad to have you guys on board.
Thanks.
See you guys later.